30 years ago, I wrote a book titled The Indiana Way. I've now written a new book with new stories and new perspectives. The question, of course, is why? And the answer is because of change, lots of change. Indiana has changed. Scholarship has changed. And perhaps I've changed. Experience, maturity, perspective, some of it from years in the university classroom teaching Indiana history. And because I've had a chance to walk more of the ground, small towns such as Portland and Vevey, and special places such as Lyle's Station and Roberts Settlement, rural black communities. And so I've written a history with new stories about pioneers, the Civil War, the changing auto industry, and much more. I wrote a lot about pioneers, from their material culture, their log cabins and quilts, to their quest for connections to the outside world, in their flatboats down to New Orleans, to their particular notions of democracy. A democracy that, as their 1816 Constitution proclaimed, rested power in the hands of the people, but a democracy they limited to white men. I write a lot about the Civil War in my new book. I'm at the Soldier and Sailors Monument in downtown Indianapolis. This is sacred space. This is the voice of the generation that fought this war, that made the immense contribution to Union victory. I'm on the west side near the figure of the seated slave, arm upstretched, chains broken, telling the most important result of the Civil War, that is emancipation, the freeing of the slaves. But I write about other aspects of the Civil War. The African-American Hoosiers who went off in Union blue to fight against the Confederacy. Oliver Morton has an important place in my book, Hoosiers. He's Indiana's Civil War governor. He is also, I believe, the most important governor in our 200 years of history. Morton worked closely with Lincoln. He worked hard to make Indiana's contribution to the war effective. He had enemies, lots of enemies. Hoosiers who did not favor the war, who wanted peace with the South. Hoosiers not in favor of emancipation. We can be grateful that Morton stood up to them. I use stories about cars to reach toward larger issues of industrialization, suburbanization, and globalization. This is a 1958 Studebaker Silver Hawk. Elwood Haynes drove one of America's first cars along the Pumpkin Vine Pike outside of Kokomo in 1894. From that beginning, Indiana's auto industry moved quickly towards center stage, ranking the state always among the top 3 in the industry. There are good stories about Indiana-made cars, such as Auburns and Duesenbergs, down to this 1958 Studebaker. But it was a parts manufacturing that Indiana factories made their mark. Factories in Anderson and Kokomo and Newcastle were part of the prosperity of the 1950s, symbolized by large tail fins, fancy grills, big engines, and about 12 miles to the gallon of gas. One of the greatest changes in the last half century was the appearance of Japanese manufacturers in Indiana. Thousands of Hoosiers went to work for a foreign employer, beginning with the Subaru plant outside of Lafayette, and then the Toyota plant near Princeton, and the Honda factory in Greensburg. In the last chapters of my book, I dig into these kinds of economic changes and the social and political context surrounding them. This is a panel from Thomas Hart Benton's mural depicting the history of Indiana, painted for the 1933 Chicago World's Fair. I chose the panel for my book cover because I love Benton's Indiana murals. They're among the state's greatest artistic treasures. I love also Benton's panel depicting the Ku Klux Klan of the 1920s, though it remains controversial. I include discomforting subjects such as the Klan because I wanted to write a full and honest history of a people in all their humanity, good and not so good. I'm with Hoagie Carmichael, a Hoosier who knew and loved Indiana. We all need a place to know. A place that sometimes frustrates or angers us. A place at times even to love. My place is Indiana. In the time of Indiana's bicentennial, I hope my new book will help others know, even occasionally love, the 19th state and the people we call Hoosiers.